The small village of Greenfield sat nestled between rolling hills, about 30 minutes from the busy streets of Lahore. Life there moved at a gentle pace, with most families working the land or commuting to the city for better jobs. Among these families were the Weiss, who lived in a modest 2-bedroom home with a small yard where Mrs. Wei grew vegetables to supplement their meals. Their son, Chen, was 8 years old, small for his age with round glasses that seemed too big for his face. Unlike many boys his age who spent their free time playing cricket or football in the dusty streets, Chen preferred to sit under the old banyan tree behind his house, watching birds and listening to their songs. He could mimic almost any sound he heard, from the call of a crow to the tune of his mother's favorite radio song. That boy lives in his own world, his father often said with a mixture of concern and pride. Mr. Wei worked long hours as a driver, hoping to save enough to give his son opportunities he never had. Though they struggled financially, they made sure Chen attended Greenfield Primary School, the only school in the village that offered education. Beyond the 6th grade, the school itself was nothing special, a square building with peeling yellow paint and classrooms that grew unbearably hot during summer months. But what made it different from other village schools was its principal, Mrs. Noor, who believed in exposing her students to more than just basic reading and arithmetic. Our children may come from simple backgrounds, she often told her staff, but their minds shouldn't be limited by their circumstances. It was this philosophy that led her to accept a donated piano from a wealthy family in Lahore who no longer wanted it. The upright piano arrived on a Tuesday morning, causing quite a stir as several men struggled to move it into what Mrs. Noor had designated as the music room, really just an unused storage space that she had cleared out and decorated with posters of musical instruments. "What are we supposed to do with this?" Mr. Khalid, the math teacher, asked with a frown. "None of us can play it, and we certainly can't afford to hire a music teacher." Mrs. Noor ran her hand over the piano's wooden surface. It was old but well-maintained, its keys yellowed with age but still in working condition. "It's about exposure," she said firmly. "Even if they just look at it, our students will know such things exist. Perhaps one day." The piano quickly became something of a curiosity for the students, who would peek into the room during breaks to look at the strange instrument. Teachers would occasionally allow well-behaved students to press a few keys as a reward, resulting in chaotic, discordant sounds that made everyone laugh. Chen had noticed the piano. Of course, he noticed everything. But unlike the other children, he didn't rush to touch it. Instead, he would stand in the doorway during lunch breaks, watching as others pounded randomly on the keys. Something about the instrument called to him, but he was too shy to join the noisy groups. 3 weeks after the piano's arrival, the village was hit with an unexpected rainstorm. The downpour started during the morning assembly and continued throughout the day, forcing all students to stay indoors during breaks. Chen, avoiding the crowded hallways where older boys often teased him about his quiet nature, found himself wandering toward the music room. The room was empty. The novelty of the piano had worn off for most students by then. Chen stood in the doorway listening to the rain drumming on the roof. Slowly, almost as if pulled by an invisible force, he entered the room and approached the piano. Mr. Anwar, the school's elderly janitor, was mopping the hallway outside when he noticed the small boy slip into the music room. Curious, he paused his work and moved closer to the door, peering inside. He expected to see the usual random key pressing that other students did. Chen stood before the piano for a long moment, just looking at it. Then he reached out a finger and pressed one key, listening intently to the note as it rang out and faded. He pressed another, then another, seeming to test each one for its sound. Mr. Anwar was about to continue his work when something unusual happened. Chen played a note, then another and another, but not randomly. The notes followed a pattern, a melody. It was simple and somewhat hesitant, but unmistakable. The chorus of Dil Dil Pakistan, a patriotic song often played on the radio. The janitor froze, mop in hand. He had worked at the school for 15 years and had never seen anything like this. The boy had no sheet music, no teacher showing him what to do. Yet here he was, picking out a recognizable tune on an instrument he had never been taught to play. As Chen gained confidence, his right hand began to find more notes, filling out the melody. Then, to Mr. Anwar's astonishment, his left hand joined in, adding simple but complementary notes that gave depth to the music. The boy's small face was a picture of concentration, his eyes half closed as if listening to something only he could hear. When the melody ended, Chen sat quietly for a moment. Then, as if trying something new, he began to play again, this time a folk tune that vendors often sang in the marketplace. The notes were not perfect. He made mistakes and sometimes paused to find the right key, but the music was real, recognizable, and played with an intuitive understanding that seemed impossible for an untrained child. Mr. Anwar must have made a noise because suddenly, Chen looked up, startled to see he was being watched. His hands jerked away from the piano as if it had burned him, and his face flushed with embarrassment. "I'm sorry," he whispered, starting to stand. "I know I shouldn't touch it without permission." No, Mr. Anwar said quickly, entering the room. "You weren't doing anything wrong." He hesitated, then asked, "Where did you learn to play like that?" Chen looked confused by the question. "I didn't learn," he said simply. "I just play what I hear in my head." "What you hear?" Mr. Anwar repeated, amazed. He had heard of people with natural musical abilities but had never expected to encounter such a talent in this small village school. "Can you play anything else?" Chen bit his lip, looking unsure. "Maybe, if I've heard it before." The old janitor thought for a moment, then began to hum a classical tune his own father had taught him years ago, a simple piece by Mozart that had always stuck in his memory. Chen listened intently, his head slightly tilted. When Mr. Anwar finished, the boy turned back to the piano and, after a moment of hesitation, began to play. The rendition wasn't perfect, but the essence of the melody was there, brought to life by small fingers that somehow knew where to go. "Extraordinary," Mr. Anwar murmured. As a young man, he had dreamed of becoming a musician himself, but life had led him down a different path. Now, watching this unassuming child play with such natural ability, he felt a mixture of wonder and responsibility. The lunch bell rang, signaling the end of the break. Chen quickly stood up, looking worried. "I need to go back to class," he said, already backing toward the door. "Wait," Mr. Anwar called. "Would you like to come back tomorrow? You can play more if you want." A small smile appeared on Chen's face, the first the janitor had ever seen from the quiet boy. He nodded once before disappearing into the hallway, now filling with students. Mr. Anwar stood alone in the music room, looking at the piano with new eyes. He knew he had just witnessed something special, something that shouldn't be kept hidden. After a moment's thought, he decided to speak with Mrs. Noor as soon as school ended. Such a gift needed nurturing, and while he didn't know how that would happen in their resource-limited village school, he knew it had to start with recognition. The rest of the day passed slowly for Chen. In class, instead of focusing on his lessons, he found himself hearing music in his mind, notes and rhythms calling to him like friends. His fingers tapped silently on his desk, practicing the movements they had discovered earlier. For the first time in his young life, Chen had found something that made complete sense to him, something that felt as natural as breathing. He didn't understand why the janitor had looked so surprised. Wasn't music always there, waiting to be released? Didn't everyone hear it in their heads? Chen didn't know it yet, but his life had just taken its first turn toward an extraordinary journey, one that would eventually lead him far beyond the boundaries of his small village and into a world where his unique gift would open doors he couldn't even imagine. Mr. Anwar couldn't sleep that night. The memory of Chen's fingers moving across the piano keys kept playing in his mind like a film on repeat. In his 46 years working various jobs, he had never seen raw talent quite like this. It reminded him of stories his grandfather told about natural gifts, people who could carve intricate designs without training or sing complex melodies after hearing them just once. But to witness such a thing firsthand was different. It felt important, almost sacred. The next morning, he arrived at school an hour earlier than usual and headed straight to Principal Noor's office. He found her already at her desk, reviewing student attendance records with a cup of steaming chai beside her. "Mrs. Noor, I need to speak with you about something unusual," he said, after she invited him in. "It's about a student, Chen Wei from 3rd grade. Mrs. Noor adjusted her glasses. "Is there a problem?" "He's always seemed like a quiet, well-behaved child." "No problem at all," Mr. Anwar replied, settling into the chair across from her. "Actually, it might be quite the opposite." He described what he had witnessed in the music room the previous day. trying his best to convey the extraordinary nature of what he had seen. Mrs. Knorr listened with growing interest. By the end of his account, she was leaning forward, her chai forgotten. "And you're certain he's never had lessons? No one teaching him at home?" I asked him. He said he just plays what he hears in his head. "The Way family." He hesitated, not wanting to speak out of turn about a student's circumstances. "Well, you know they struggle. Mr. Way drives a delivery van and Mrs. Way takes in washing. They could never afford a piano, let alone lessons." Mrs. Knorr nodded thoughtfully. "I'd like to see this for myself. Can you bring Chen to the music room during first period? I'll make arrangements with his teacher." Word spread quickly among the staff after Mrs. Knorr witnessed Chen's playing for herself. The shy third grader became something of a curiosity, with teachers finding excuses to pass by the music room during lunch breaks when Mr. Anwar would let Chen practice. The janitor had taken it upon himself to be the boy's unofficial guardian at school, keeping other children from teasing him while ensuring he had time with the piano each day. Chen seemed to bloom under this new attention. Though still quiet in class, he became animated when allowed to play, his whole body expressing what his soft-spoken nature usually concealed. Each day he played with more confidence, attempting more complex melodies he had heard on the radio, or from the folk musicians who sometimes performed in the village square. "We need to find someone who can teach him properly," Mrs. Knorr said during a staff meeting 2 weeks after the discovery. "He has a gift that needs nurturing, but who?" asked Ms. Parveen, the science teacher. "There's no music teacher in our village, and we certainly can't afford to hire one with our budget." The room fell silent as they contemplated the problem. Then Mr. Khalid cleared his throat. "What about Mr. Farouk?" Everyone turned to look at him. "The district music coordinator?" Mrs. Knorr asked, her eyebrows rising. "The one who used to perform with the National Symphony?" Mr. Khalid nodded. "My brother-in-law works as a driver for the education department. He says Mr. Farouk visits schools in the district to evaluate their arts programs. Perhaps we could request a visit?" Mrs. Knorr looked skeptical. "Mr. Farouk hasn't visited our school in 5 years. Last time he said our facilities were inadequate and our students showed no aptitude worth his time. That was before we had Chen," Mr. Anwar pointed out. "And before we had a piano." After much discussion, Mrs. Knorr agreed to make the call. It took 3 attempts before she finally reached Mr. Farouk, and the conversation did not go as hoped. "A natural prodigy? In your school?" The man's laugh crackled through the phone. "Haha, can this kid really play the piano? Or does he just bang on the keys while you all pretend it's Mozart?" Mrs. Knorr's grip tightened on the receiver. "I assure you, Mr. Farouk, this is quite real. The boy has never had lessons, yet he can reproduce complex melodies after hearing them just once." "I've heard such claims before," Mr. Farouk replied dismissively. "Parents and teachers always think their children are special. In 30 years of teaching music, I've met perhaps 3 students with genuine talent. The rest were merely adequate with good training." "Then come see for yourself," Mrs. Knorr challenged, her patience wearing thin. "If you're so certain we're mistaken, it should only take a few minutes of your valuable time to prove it." There was a long pause on the line. Finally, Mr. Farouk spoke again, his tone slightly less condescending. "Very well. I have an evaluation in a nearby district next Tuesday. I suppose I could stop by your school afterward. But I warn you, I won't be gentle if this turns out to be a waste of my time." "We ask only for fairness," Mrs. Knorr replied evenly. "We'll expect you at 2 o'clock. News of the impending visit spread throughout the school, creating a mixture of excitement and anxiety. For Chen, who had never performed for anyone beyond his teachers and classmates, the prospect was terrifying. "I can't play for him," he whispered to Mr. Anwar the day before the visit. They were in the music room during lunch break, the usual time when Chen practiced. But today his hands remained in his lap. "What if he thinks I'm no good?" Mr. Anwar sat beside him on the piano bench. "Do you enjoy playing?" he asked gently. Chen nodded without hesitation. "Then play for yourself, not for him. The music doesn't change because someone important is listening." Chen considered this, then placed his hands on the keys and began to play a simple folk melody. His tension visibly eased as the music filled the room. Mr. Farouk arrived exactly at 2 o'clock the following day. He was a tall man with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses, dressed in an expensive-looking suit that seemed out of place in the humble village school. His posture radiated importance as he followed Mrs. Knorr to her office, barely glancing at the curious faces peering out from classrooms as they passed. "Let me be clear," he said once they were seated. "I'm extremely busy with the regional music competition coming up. I've agreed to this visit solely to put an end to what I suspect are exaggerated claims." Mrs. Noor maintained her composure. "We appreciate your time, Mr. Farouk. I've arranged for you to meet Chen in our music room. His class is being brought there now." Mr. Farouk opened his briefcase and removed a folder. "I've brought some simple pieces to test him. If he truly has this natural ability you claim, he should be able to reproduce them after hearing them once." They walked to the music room in silence. Inside, Chen sat alone on the piano bench, looking smaller than usual in his neatly pressed uniform. Mr. Anwar stood nearby, offering a reassuring presence. The rest of Chen's class had been seated on the floor at the back of the room, under strict instructions from their teacher to remain absolutely silent. Mr. Farouk surveyed the scene with barely concealed skepticism. Without introducing himself to Chen, he addressed Mrs. Noor. "I'll play a simple piece on my phone. If the boy can reproduce even half of it correctly, I'll be surprised." He scrolled through his phone and selected a recording. The melody that filled the room was not simple at all. It was a section of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. With its flowing left-hand accompaniment and delicate right-hand melody, Chen listened intently, his eyes closed. When the short recording ended, Mr. Farouk gestured toward the piano with a challenging look. "Well, can you play what you just heard?" Chen looked at Mr. Anwar, who gave him an encouraging nod. Slowly, he turned to the piano and placed his hands on the keys. After a moment of hesitation, he began to play. The first few notes were tentative but quickly gained confidence. Though not perfect, his small hands couldn't reach some of the wider stretches. The essence of Chopin's piece emerged from the old upright piano. The melody sang clearly above the accompanying harmonies. With Chen instinctively emphasizing the emotional rises and falls of the phrase, Mr. Farouk's expression shifted from skepticism to disbelief, then to something like alarm. He moved closer to the piano, watching Chen's hands as if searching for some trick or deception. When Chen finished playing, the room remained silent, everyone waiting for Mr. Farouk's reaction. "That was," he began, then cleared his throat. "Let's try something else." This time, he selected a Bach invention, more complex in its interweaving melodic lines. Again, Chen listened, and again he reproduced what he heard, not note perfect, but capturing the structural essence and musical intent in a way that should have been impossible for an untrained child. By the third piece, Mr. Farouk was no longer looking at his phone but staring at Chen with an intensity that might have frightened the boy if he hadn't been so absorbed in the music. When Chen finished playing a simplified version of Mozart's Turkish March, Mr. Farouk turned to Mrs. Noor. "May I speak with you privately?" His voice had lost all its earlier condescension. Outside in the hallway, Mr. Farouk paced back and forth. "This is not possible," he muttered more to himself than to Mrs. Noor. "I've never seen anything like it. He's not just mimicking the notes, he understands the music intuitively. The phrasing, the dynamics." He stopped pacing and faced her directly. "Who has been teaching him?" "No one," Mrs. Noor replied simply. "As we told you, he discovered the piano himself less than a month ago." Mr. Farouk ran a hand through his silver hair, disheveling its perfect arrangement. "Do you understand what this means? This boy has a gift that appears perhaps once in a generation. Without training, without theory, he's doing what takes others years to learn." He glanced back toward the music room door. "And in this village, of all places." The slight disdain in his tone wasn't lost on Mrs. Noor. "Talent doesn't check postal codes before deciding where to appear. Mr. Farouk," he had the grace to look embarrassed. "No, of course not. I just meant, the opportunities here are so limited, which is why we called you," she replied. "We need your help." Back in the music room, Chen sat quietly at the piano, his fingers lightly touching the keys without pressing them. The other children had been sent back to their classroom, but Mr. Anwar remained, watching the door and wondering what was happening in the hallway conversation between Mrs. Noor and Mr. Farouk. "Am I in trouble?" Chen asked softly, looking up at the janitor. Mr. Anwar shook his head, smiling. "Not at all. I think you've just surprised our visitor." "He didn't look happy when I played," Chen observed. "I made too many mistakes." "That's not why he looked shocked," Mr. Anwar replied. "He looked that way because what you did was remarkable. Most people study for years to play like you just did. Before Chen could respond, the door opened. Mrs. Noor entered, followed by Mr. Farouk, whose entire demeanor had changed. The haughtiness was gone from his posture, replaced by an intensity of focus directed entirely at Chen. "Young man," Mr. Farouk said, pulling a chair close to the piano. "I'd like to try something different." His voice, previously sharp and dismissive, had softened considerably. "Instead of playing a recording, I'm going to play something myself. I want you to watch my hands, listen to the music, and then try to play it back. Can you do that?" Chen nodded, though he looked nervous. Mr. Farouk slid onto the bench beside Chen, who moved over to make room. The man's hands, with their long fingers and neatly trimmed nails, hovered over the keys for a moment before descending into a gentle, flowing melody. It wasn't a famous piece, but something simpler. A teaching composition with a clear structure and pleasant harmonies. As he played, Mr. Farouk occasionally glanced at Chen, noting how the boy's eyes moved between the keyboard and Mr. Farouk's hands, absorbing every detail. When he finished, he stood and gestured for Chen to try. Chen took a deep breath and began to play. Though his version wasn't identical, his smaller hands changed some of the fingering. The melody and harmonies were remarkably faithful to what Mr. Farouk had played. More impressively, Chen captured the same gentle flow and expression, as if he'd understood not just the notes but the feeling behind them. When he finished, Chen looked up uncertainly. Mr. Farouk didn't speak immediately. He walked to the window, staring out at the schoolyard where students were having their afternoon physical education class. Finally, he turned back to the room. "I've been teaching music for 30 years, he said, his voice unusually quiet. "I've worked with thousands of students, including many who went on to professional careers. But I can count on one hand those with true natural talent." He looked directly at Chen. "You have something special, young man. Something very special indeed." The room fell silent except for the distant sounds of children playing outside and the ceiling fan's gentle whirring overhead. Mrs. Noor broke the silence. "So you agree that Chen has exceptional ability?" "More than exceptional," Mr. Farouk replied. "What he has is extremely rare." He returned to the piano, standing beside it with one hand resting on its worn wooden surface. "But raw talent is just the beginning. Without proper training, even the greatest natural gifts can go to waste. That's why we contacted you," Mrs. Noor said. "We hoped you might have suggestions for how we could help Chen develop his talent." Mr. Farouk paced the room, clearly deep in thought. "Normally, I would recommend a special school for the arts in the city. But those institutions are expensive, competitive, and—" He hesitated, glancing at Chen, not always nurturing environments for a child this young. "His family couldn't afford such a school anyway," Mr. Anwar added quietly. "They struggle to make ends meet as it is." Mr. Farouk nodded, continuing to pace. Suddenly, he stopped and turned to face them all. "I've made a decision," he announced. "I will teach him myself." Mrs. Noor's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "You? But you're the district coordinator." "Surely your schedule—" "I'll make time," Mr. Farouk interrupted. "2 afternoons a week I'll come here after my official duties are complete. No fees, no formal arrangements, just teacher and student." He looked directly at Chen. "That is, if you want to learn." Chen's eyes widened. "Yes, sir," he whispered, a smile spreading across his face. "I want to learn very much." "It's settled then," Mr. Farouk declared, clapping his hands together once as if closing a deal. "We begin next week. And—" He raised a finger, looking between Mrs. Noor and Mr. Anwar. "I'd like to keep this arrangement between us for now. No announcements, no publicity. The boy needs space to develop without pressure or expectations." As they worked out the details, Chen sat quietly at the piano, occasionally pressing a key so gently that it made no sound. His mind was racing with thoughts he couldn't quite put into words. Excitement mixed with nervousness, and beneath it all, a deep sense of rightness. The piano, which he'd only known for a few weeks, already felt like an old friend. And now he would learn its secrets properly. After Mr. Farouk left, Mrs. Noor knelt beside Chen. "Your parents will need to give permission for these lessons. Shall we talk to them together? I could drive you home today." Chen nodded gratefully. Though he was excited, the thought of explaining all this to his parents by himself was overwhelming. The drive to Chen's home took just 10 minutes, winding through narrow village roads where chickens scattered before the car and old men playing cards nodded respectfully to Mrs. Noor. When they arrived at the small, house with its tin roof and carefully swept dirt yard. Chen's mother was hanging laundry while his 4-year-old sister played nearby with a homemade doll. Mrs. Wei looked surprised to see the principal's car, immediately wiping her hands on her apron and hurrying forward with concern on her face. "Is everything all right? Has Chen done something wrong?" "Everything is more than all right," Mrs. Noor assured her with a smile. "In fact, we've discovered something quite wonderful about your son. May we come inside and talk?" Inside the modest home, with its neatly arranged furniture and family photos carefully displayed on a small shelf, Mrs. Noor explained what had been happening at school. She described how Chen had discovered the piano, Mr. Anwar's observation of his natural ability, and finally, Mr. Farouk's visit and extraordinary offer. Mrs. Wei listened with wide eyes, occasionally glancing at Chen as if seeing him for the first time. "We never knew," she said softly. "He sometimes hums melodies or taps rhythms on the table, but all children do such things." "Your son has a very special gift," Mrs. Noor explained. "Mr. Farouk believes he has the potential to become truly exceptional with proper training. This teacher, he will charge fees?" Mrs. Wei asked hesitantly, the worry clear in her voice. "My husband works very hard, but extra lessons on no fees," Mrs. Noor assured her quickly. "Mr. Farouk has offered to teach Chen free of charge. He sees this as an opportunity to nurture a rare talent." Relief washed over Mrs. Wei's face, followed by a mother's natural suspicion. "Why would this important man do this for my son? What does he want in return?" Mrs. Noor considered her answer carefully. "In the world of music, discovering a truly gifted student is something special. For a teacher like Mr. Farouk, the opportunity to guide such talent is its own reward." She smiled gently, though I suspect his motives aren't entirely selfless. "There's a certain prestige in discovering and mentoring a prodigy." Mrs. Wei nodded slowly, seeming to accept this explanation. "Chen's father must hear of this too. He will be home after 7. "Of course," Mrs. Noor agreed. "Perhaps I could return this evening? Or Mr. Farouk could visit himself to answer any questions." "That would be good," Mrs. Wei said, then turned to her son, who had been sitting quietly throughout the conversation. She spoke to him in a mix of their dialect and the common language, her tone gentle but questioning. Chen responded softly, his face animated in a way it rarely was except when at the piano. Mrs. Wei listened intently, then looked back at Mrs. Noor with tears shimmering in her eyes. "He says the music feels like it was always inside him, waiting to come out. That when he touches the piano, he finally understands his own thoughts." She reached out to stroke her son's hair. "How could we not let him learn?" That evening, Mr. Farouk himself came to meet Chen's father. Mr. Wei, tired from a long day of driving but respectful of this unexpected visitor, listened carefully to the explanation. Unlike his wife, he asked many practical questions. How would these lessons affect Chen's regular studies? What about transportation on the days when Mr. Farouk would teach? Would Chen be expected to perform in public? Mr. Farouk answered each question patiently, explaining that the lessons would take place after school hours, that he would arrange transportation if needed, and that there would be no public performances until Chen was ready, and only then with his parents' permission. "I don't know much about music," Mr. Wei admitted finally. "In my family, we never had time for such things. Always there was work to be done." He looked at his son with a mixture of pride and bewilderment. "But if Chen has this gift, as you say, it would be wrong to ignore it." And so it was agreed. The following Tuesday would mark the beginning of Chen's formal musical education, and though none of them realized it yet, the first step on a journey that would take him far beyond the boundaries of their small village. That night, Chen lay awake long after his parents and sister had fallen asleep, his fingers moving silently in the darkness, playing invisible melodies on his bedsheet. For the first time in his young life, he felt truly seen, not for who he was expected to be, but for who he actually was. The village of Greenfield awoke to an unusual sight on that first Tuesday of Chen's lessons. A sleek black car with government plates parked outside the school gates. Children gathered around it, admiring their reflections in its polished surface until the bell called them to class. Inside the building, Mr. Farouk had arrived early, carrying a leather briefcase filled with sheet music, pencils, and a small electronic metronome. "We'll need a more structured environment," he told Mrs. Noor as they prepared the music room. "I've brought some materials to begin with. Eventually we'll need proper books, a better bench." He glanced around the room critically. And this piano needs tuning. I'll arrange for that next week. Mrs. Noor watched as he reorganized the space, moving the piano to better catch the natural light from the windows, clearing nearby shelves to make room for music books. His energy and focus were infectious, and she found herself excited about possibilities that hadn't seemed within reach just days ago. "You've changed since your visit last week," she observed. "I hardly recognize the man who laughed at us over the phone." Mr. Farouk paused in his arrangements, a flash of embarrassment crossing his face. "Yes, well, I was wrong. Spectacularly wrong." He adjusted his glasses, a gesture that seemed to help him regain his composure. "In my position, one becomes cynical. Too many disappointed parents, too many mediocre students described as gifted." He turned to face her directly. "But your boy, Chen, he's the real thing. And when you encounter the real thing after years of imitations, it changes you." The school day passed with an air of suppressed excitement. Chen found it hard to concentrate on his lessons, his mind continuously drifting to the afternoon ahead. When the final bell rang, he hurried to the music room, arriving before Mr. Farouk had finished setting up. You're prompt. Good. That's the first sign of a serious student," Mr. Farouk said, gesturing for Chen to sit beside him at the piano. "Today we begin your real education. Are you nervous?" Chen nodded, his hands folded tightly in his lap. "Good. A little nervousness sharpens the mind." Mr. Farouk opened a thin book of simple exercises. "Before we can run, we must learn to walk. Before we play great music, we must understand how music works." What followed was unlike anything Chen had expected. There was no playing of beautiful melodies, no praise for his natural abilities. Instead, Mr. Farouk began with the fundamentals, explaining the musical staff, note values, time signatures. He was stern but patient, making Chen write out notes on manuscript paper, correcting his pencil grip, insisting on precision in every detail. Only in the last 15 minutes did they actually touch the piano. And even then, it was to practice simple 5-finger exercises, up and down the keys with metronomic precision. Chen's fingers, which had flown so freely over the keyboard before, felt stiff and awkward under this new discipline. "Remember, we are building a foundation," Mr. Farouk said, noticing Chen's frustration. "It may seem tedious now, but everything that comes later will rest upon this groundwork." He closed the piano lid gently. "Practice these exercises daily. On Thursday, we'll see how you've progressed." As the weeks passed, a routine developed. Twice a week, Mr. Farouk arrived at the school, and for 2 hours he guided Chen through the structured world of formal music education. Between lessons, Chen practiced religiously. During lunch breaks, after school under Mr. Anwar's watchful eye, and at home on a paper keyboard Mr. Farouk had given him to practice fingering exercises. The changes in Chen became noticeable to everyone. The painfully shy boy who once hid during recess now walked with quiet confidence. He still didn't speak much, but when he did, his voice carried new authority. His academic performance improved too, particularly in mathematics, which Mr. Farouk explained was closely related to the patterns and structures of music. At home, Chen's parents observed the transformation with a mixture of pride and bewilderment. One evening, as Chen sat at the kitchen table practicing his music theory homework, his father paused behind him, watching the careful notation taking shape on the paper. "I don't understand any of this," Mr. Wei admitted, "but I can see it makes you happy." He placed a hand briefly on his son's shoulder. "Your teacher says you're learning faster than any student he's ever had." Chen looked up, surprised. "He told you that?" Mr. Wei nodded. "He calls me sometimes to give reports on your progress." He hesitated, then added softly, "I never thought a son of mine would have such opportunities. We are very proud." The simple words, so rarely spoken in their practical, hard-working family, meant more to Chen than any praise from Mr. Farouk. 3 months into their lessons, Mr. Farouk arrived with a guest, a small, elderly man carrying a toolbox. "This is Mr. Huang," Mr. Farouk explained to Chen. "He's the best piano tuner in the district. I've asked him to fix our piano properly." While Mr. Huang worked opening the piano to adjust its strings and mechanisms, Mr. Farouk took Chen to the library to continue their theory lesson. When they returned an hour later, the change was remarkable. The old upright piano, which had served admirably despite its flaws, now sang with a clarity and resonance that transformed the humble school music room. "Now," Mr. Farouk said after Mr. Huang had left, we can truly begin to make music. He placed a new piece of sheet music on the stand, Clementi's Sonatina in C major, a simple but elegant classical piece. You've mastered the exercises. Let's see if you can apply what you've learned. Chen studied the music, recognizing the patterns they had practiced for months, scales, arpeggios, chord progressions, now woven into a beautiful composition. Slowly at first, then with growing confidence, he began to play. His natural intuition, now supported by proper technique and understanding, brought the piece to life in a way that made Mr. Farouk sit very still, listening intently. When Chen finished, Mr. Farouk remained silent for a long moment. "Do you understand what just happened?" he finally asked. "You just read and played a piece you've never heard before. 3 months ago, you couldn't read a single note." Chen hadn't thought of it that way. He had been so focused on each day's progress that he hadn't noticed how far he had come. Mr. Farouk stood and walked to the window, clasping his hands behind his back. "I think it's time we discussed your future more seriously." "My future?" Chen repeated, unsure what his teacher meant. "There's a regional youth music competition in 3 months," Mr. Farouk explained. "Students from all over the province compete. It's quite prestigious. Scholarships are awarded, important people attend." He turned back to face Chen. "I believe you should enter." Chen felt a flutter of panic. "Perform? In front of people? I don't think I can." "Of course you can," Mr. Farouk interrupted firmly. "Your talent deserves to be heard beyond these walls." His expression softened slightly. "I understand it's frightening, but sometimes we must do frightening things to grow." That evening, Mr. Farouk stayed late to speak with Chen's parents, who had been invited to the school for this special meeting. Mrs. Noor and Mr. Anwar joined them in her office, where Mr. Farouk explained his proposal. He outlined the competition, the preparation required, and most importantly, what it could mean for Chen's future. If he does well, and I believe he will do very well indeed, it could open doors, Mr. Farouk explained. There are special schools for gifted musicians, scholarships, opportunities that would otherwise be impossible. Mr. Wei looked concerned. These opportunities, they would take him away from home? From us? Eventually, perhaps, Mr. Farouk admitted. Great talent requires nurturing in the right environment. But that's a bridge to cross later. For now, the competition is just a first step, a chance for others to recognize what we already know. Mrs. Wei, who had been quiet throughout the discussion, finally spoke. "What does Chen want?" "Has anyone asked him?" All eyes turned to Chen, who sat with his hands folded tightly in his lap, just as he had during that first lesson. "I want to play," he said simply. "I'm scared of performing, but..." He looked up at his parents. "I think I need to try." The adults exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between them. This quiet boy with his extraordinary gift was showing them the way forward. "Then it's decided," Mr. Farouk declared. "We begin preparation immediately. 3 months isn't long, but with Chen's rate of progress..." He turned to Mr. and Mrs. Wei. "Your son has the potential to go far beyond what any of us initially imagined. Supporting his journey won't be easy, but I promise you, it will be worthwhile." As they left the school that evening, walking home under a sky brilliant with stars, Chen felt a strange mix of emotions. Fear about the competition ahead, excitement about the possibilities Mr. Farouk had described, and beneath it all, a deep certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be. The path ahead might be difficult, but for the first time in his life, it was clear. The 3 months leading up to the competition passed in a blur of intense preparation. Chen's life became structured around practice sessions, theory lessons, and the careful selection and refinement of his competition pieces. Mr. Farouk was demanding but fair, pushing Chen to levels he hadn't known he could reach while remaining attentive to signs of fatigue or frustration. Music should never become a burden, he reminded Chen one afternoon when the boy was struggling with a particularly difficult passage in Chopin's Waltz in a minor. "Take a break. Walk around the schoolyard once, then return with fresh eyes and fingers." The entire school had rallied behind Chen's preparation. Mrs. Noor arranged for him to leave his last class 15 minutes early each day to practice. His classmates, initially jealous of the special treatment, became supportive after hearing him play at a small school assembly Mr. Farouk had organized as a practice performance. "You need to get used to playing for an audience," he'd explained to Chen. who had been terrified at the prospect. Think of it as a vaccination, a small dose of fear now to prevent a larger one later. That first performance had been nerve-wracking. Chen's hands had trembled as he'd walked to the piano, and the first few notes were hesitant. But as he played, something magical happened. The music transported him to a place where nerves couldn't follow. By the end of the piece, his playing was confident and expressive, earning him a standing ovation from students and teachers alike. At home, Chen's parents did what they could to support his journey. His father adjusted his work schedule to drive Chen to extra weekend lessons at Mr. Farouk's studio in the city. His mother learned to cook specific foods that Mr. Farouk recommended for musicians, dishes rich in nutrients that would support his developing mind and body. Even his little sister helped in her own way, shushing neighbors' children when they played too loudly outside during Chen's practice time. 1 week before the competition, Mr. Farouk arranged for Chen to practice on the actual grand piano he would use in the performance. The Lahore Arts Council, where the competition would be held, opened its doors early on a Sunday morning to accommodate them. Chen's eyes widened at the sight of the magnificent concert hall with its tiered seating and glittering chandeliers. The grand piano on stage, its polished black surface gleaming under the spotlights, seemed like something from another world compared to the worn upright he was used to. "Go on," Mr. Farouk encouraged. "It's just another piano. Bigger, yes, with a different touch and sound, but still just wood and strings that respond to your fingers." Chen approached the instrument with reverence, running his fingers lightly over the cool, smooth keys before sitting on the bench. The first notes he played resonated through the empty hall with a richness that made him catch his breath. It was like comparing a whisper to a full voice. The same words, but with so much more presence and power. "Now you understand why we've worked so hard," Mr. Farouk said, noting Chen's expression of wonder. "Your music deserves to be heard on an instrument worthy of it." They spent 3 hours in the hall that day, making minute adjustments to Chen's technique to accommodate the more responsive instrument. By the end of the session, Chen felt both exhilarated and humbled, excited by the beautiful sound he could produce on the grand piano, but also newly aware of how much he still had to learn. The day of the competition arrived with perfect spring weather, sunshine spilling across the city, flowers blooming in the parks, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of jasmine through the streets. Chen barely noticed any of it. From the moment he woke at dawn, his mind was filled with music, mentally rehearsing his pieces, going over Mr. Farouk's last-minute instructions. His mother had laid out his best clothes, a crisp white shirt, dark pants, and a blue tie that Mr. Farouk had given him as a gift the previous day. "For good luck," the teacher had said, helping Chen practice the correct knot. The competition was held in 3 rounds. First, all 26 young pianists would perform their required piece, a Bach invention assigned by the judges. Those who passed this round would then play their personal selection, and the top 3 would compete in a final round with another required piece they would be given just 1 hour to prepare. Chen's family, along with Mrs. Noor and Mr. Anwar, sat nervously in the audience as the competition began. Most of the other competitors were older than Chen, many from prestigious music schools or wealthy families who had provided private lessons since early childhood. They arrived with their own music teachers, carrying leather portfolios of sheet music and dressed in performance attire that spoke of experience and confidence. Backstage, Chen waited for his turn, number 17 in the performance order. Mr. Farouk stayed with him, offering quiet reassurance as they listened to the other young pianists perform. Some played with technical precision but little emotion. Others showed great feeling but made small mistakes. All were talented, the product of years of dedicated training. "Remember," Mr. Farouk said as Chen's turn approached, "you have something they don't. You don't just play the notes, you feel the music. Let that guide your fingers." When Chen's name was called, he walked onto the stage with his eyes focused on the piano, trying to ignore the hundreds of faces watching him. The spotlight felt hot, the silence of the audience oppressive. As he settled on the bench, adjusting its height as Mr. Farouk had taught him, he took a deep breath and placed his hands on the keys. The Bach invention flowed from his fingers with a clarity that surprised even him. The months of technical exercises Mr. Farouk had insisted on now paid off as Chen navigated the intricate counterpoint with precision and grace. When he finished, the applause was warm and appreciative. He had passed the first test. 2 hours later, Chen returned to the stage for the second round. This time, he would play Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, the very piece Mr. Farouk had first used to test him, now mastered through months of careful study. As he began to play, Chen forgot about the judges, the audience, the competition itself. He was lost in the music, his small body swaying slightly as the haunting melody rose and fell beneath his hands. In the audience, Chen's father, who had always viewed his son's talent with a mixture of pride and incomprehension, felt tears spring to his eyes. The music spoke to something deep within him, a yearning, a hope, a beauty he had never had words for. Beside him, Mrs. Wei held their daughter on her lap, the little girl unusually still as she watched her brother transformed on stage. When Chen finished, the hall was silent for one heartbeat, two, then erupted in applause more enthusiastic than any performer had received that day. Even the other competitors' parents were clapping with genuine appreciation. One of the judges leaned over to whisper something to another, both nodding with thoughtful expressions. Chen was selected for the final round, along with 2 older students from established music schools in the city. Given just 1 hour to prepare a Mozart sonata, the 3 finalists retreated to separate practice rooms. Mr. Farouk spent the time helping Chen analyze the piece, identifying its key sections and technical challenges. Don't try to memorize it all, he advised. Focus on understanding its structure, its heart. Your natural musicality will guide you through the details. When Chen returned to the stage for the final performance, a new confidence radiated from him. He no longer seemed like a village boy overwhelmed by the grand surroundings, but a musician who belonged precisely where he was. His performance of the Mozart, while not note-perfect, captured the composer's playful spirit and elegant phrasing in a way that made several audience members lean forward in their seats. The judges deliberated for 20 minutes after the final performances. Chen sat backstage between his 2 competitors, a serious 15-year-old girl from an arts academy and a technically brilliant 14-year-old boy whose father was a well-known musician. Both were polite but distant, perhaps unsettled by the unexpected challenge from this unknown younger boy. When the results were announced, a murmur of surprise rippled through the hall. Chen had placed second, an extraordinary achievement for his first competition, his age, and his background. The scholarship prize would cover 2 years of formal training at the prestigious Lahore Academy of Music, with the possibility of extension based on his progress. As Chen stood on stage receiving his certificate, he spotted Mr. Farouk in the wings nodding with fierce pride. In the audience, his parents were beaming, though his father kept wiping his eyes when he thought no one was looking. Mrs. Noor and Mr. Anwar were applauding enthusiastically, the janitor giving a thumbs up when he caught Chen's eye. Later, at a small celebration in a cafe near the Arts Council, Mr. Farouk raised a glass of fresh orange juice in a toast. Today marks the beginning, he said, looking around at Chen's family and supporters. I've seen many talented students come and go, but rarely one with such promise. With continued hard work and the right guidance, there is no limit to what he might achieve. Chen, sipping his own juice and still slightly dazed by the day's events, felt both excited and slightly overwhelmed by the path stretching before him. It would mean changes for his whole family. Long commutes to the academy, new expectations, challenges he couldn't yet imagine. But when he looked at his parents' proud faces, at Mr. Farouk, who had transformed from skeptic to mentor, at Mrs. Noor and Mr. Anwar, who had first recognized and nurtured his gift, he knew he wouldn't walk that path alone. What had begun as a chance encounter with an old piano in a village, school had opened a door to a world he was only beginning to explore, a world where the music that had always lived inside him could finally find its full voice.